Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Crupi. I'm a biologist with 15 years of academic research experience internationally, and I've been working on a lot of different things, and ultimately I have also had to overcome a lot of personal challenges. I'm here to guide you towards awakening and ego death. Ego death and trauma healing are the most important tasks we need to accomplish today for humanity. The second season of the New Earth podcast is going to be specifically focused on giving you stories so that you see the trails and what kind of breadcrumbs you need to follow for you to reach your own ego death, for you to reach your own trauma healing, and for you to embody your highest self finally. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about healing ourselves and healing the world. Are those the same thing? What is the difference? And especially, are them possible without each other? This is the most important topic I think I want to really talk about for the next season. And so this is most likely going to be the intro, in a sense, to a next season of this podcast. Let's see, I'm not sure about this yet, but most likely. So I feel like I want to give you some introduction also to my journey, in a sense, and to show you how um, I really have in my life, I've really healed a lot. Like I was born, let's start from the beginning. Let's do this. I feel like I was born a very still child, in the sense I was very cute and very nice. And if you see my pictures as a child, you can tell that I was very, very free from ego, free from trauma. I was very, very already very empathetic. I'm an empath, and so I was born very empathetic already. But I also, obviously, I'm the first child, and so I've been very pampered a lot and nurtured a lot by everybody around me, by a lot of men especially. And this gave me a lot of this feeling of being safe, of safety as a child. And I think this is one of the most important things you can give to your children, to make them feel safe. And it's really the beginning of not having trauma. However, um, our world is not safe. We live in a jungle, in a sense, and so it's okay to I feel like I always remember this phrase of Chris Rock in one of his shows, where he says, I'm sending my child, his daughter, to school, and the school says, oh, don't worry, this school is free of bullies. And he's like, I'm gonna take her out of that school, because the world is full of bullies, and bullies in school are absolutely fundamental for us to really learn how the world really works. And so the teachers do their job and the bullies do their own job in school to teach people how the world works. However, I feel like as a really young child, it's really fundamental to be safe, to feel safe, in order to develop, to have a brain development that is more towards an empathetic instead of narcissistic side. And this is really also scientifically proven. So it's fundamental to feel safe, at least in the very first part of your childhood. And that's how I felt. And that was incredible. And again, you can see from my eyes, you can read a world from people's eyes. And you can see from my eyes as a child that I was really just a pure spirit, just pure, innocent, and cute, and really free from any form of abuse. Or I was not really, I was surrounded by a lot of love, unconditional love, in a lot of different ways. But then I started also going through a lot of things, because I also come from a dysfunctional family. I also come from, from people who had generational trauma. I come from Italy, and my, great grandparents and grandparents saw or fought in the Second World War, for example. And so we had a lot of generational trauma to cleanse from in Italy as well. And that obviously in time translates into, dysfunctional families of various kinds, because if people have dysfunctions and nobody takes care of those dysfunctions, then they are going to build partnerships that are dysfunctional. And so even if at the very beginning, when I was a child, I did not see those things, and probably my parents weren't even fighting, because I don't remember about that. But then, things start happening. And so my parents later on divorced. And so I did go through a lot of trauma in that sense. But at the same time, because I started as a very innocent child, the route that I took, the route that I took was ultimately more towards the empathetic side. But it's easy to develop these functions when you're part of these sort of context in a sense. So it's very, very important that at the very beginning, when the brain develops in a child, they have the possibility to really have a full, proper brain development so that then they can handle things properly, or even if they go through trauma, they can recover. And that's how I am. Like every time I go through things, then I wake up. There's always a point in which I wake up. A lot of people never wake up. And the reason why is ultimately because they lack this feeling of safety, because feeling safe makes you feel like you can overcome things. Like feeling safe is a way, like not only feeling safe, but also feeling like, powerful, especially if you're the first child. I feel like it can give you a lot of power, a lot of strength, because it makes you feel like there's no one in front of you to open the door and to open the way for you. And so that feeling on its own has helped me tremendously in my life, because it made me become very independent. But that at the same time, like this is the thing, that we can be born. Healing is not just about healing from trauma, because why do you have trauma in the first place? Like some people have generational trauma to cleanse from. Some people have trauma that happens in their life that has to do with something that was out of their control, such as a car accident, for example, or someone who beats them up as a child, like bullies, for example. But that kind of trauma is in some way something you cannot truly change. In the sense, if someone hits your car while you're driving, it's really out of your control, for example. But there are other things on which we have a part, and it's not our fault. It's just that, again, we're born that way. And so I was born also a very naive child. Naive because I was free from trauma, free from ego. And so when you're free from those things, I feel like I am what cycle breakers are, and I am a cycle breaker, are people who have already genetically and epigenetically cleansed from the generational trauma. And because of that, they don't have it in themselves. So because of that, they're ignorant about it. And so moral of the story, and this is what we're going to be talking about in this episode more specifically, is can we heal and not heal the world around us? Or can we be healthy and live in a world that is traumatized instead? And the answer to this, you'll see through the podcast, but I can kind of like spoiler alert, it's really no. And the reason why we're seeing it right now, because this, you see, like one of the most searched words in 2022, I believe, has been gaslighting. And the reason why is because a lot of people are going through narcissistic abuse. But what is narcissistic abuse? Narcissistic abuse is the abuse of a person who lacks the awareness, the knowledge about the fact that there are people in the world who intentionally, constantly try and hurt others, try and opportunistically use others. So how is that possible that so many people went through narcissistic abuse? How can they not know that there are certain people who function a certain way? And the answer to that is because we are the generation that has cleansed from generational trauma at the genetic and epigenetic, and so neurobiological level, and energetic as well, spiritual. And so because of that, it's normal that we have to get to know people around us to understand that, okay, this exists. Like I don't have it in me. I don't have an ego in me. I'm not a narcissist. I don't have narcissistic tendencies. I don't have narcissistic traits. I don't use others. I don't love conditionally. All of those things are just words for someone who is just naive and doesn't know about how the world works and how these things really exist. So this is just normal. This has happened because it's natural. Because whenever there is a wave of trauma that travels and needs to disperse, then the ones who disperse it first, they are born cleansed. They're born cleansed from sin, cleansed from ego, cleansed from evil. But because of that, they can't really be healthy and at the same time not being aware of what is going on. And for them to be aware, they have to go through trauma. This is why we talk about trauma so much, because we have to go through trauma, not because we need to learn about trauma, but because it's inevitable. Like, it's the only way for us, the only way for an empath to come to understand ego, evil, like narcissism. It's by going through narcissistic relationships, or, there is no other way. Because if you don't go through those things, you're never going to learn what they actually are. And I'm not saying that everybody has to go through them. Sometimes even observing from the outside can be a good experience. But at the same time, if you observe narcissistic abuse and you don't intervene, then you become a narcissist, because you're basically allowing others to be abused instead of you. And so this is also another form of abuse, is abuse by a proxy, in a sense. It's like it's allowing abuse to happen to keep yourself safe. And it's a beautiful evolutionary way of surviving, but at the same time, it completely removes empathy for others. Because in order for you to allow things to happen to other people around you, like to your brothers, to your sisters, your siblings, or to your friends as a child, in order for you to allow those things to happen and to not intervene, you must in some way lose empathy for them. And losing empathy is the first sign and the first ground, the fertile ground for narcissism, to develop narcissism. And what is narcissism? From a spiritual standpoint, is really the devil. Wow, stop it. From a spiritual standpoint, narcissism is the devil that takes over people's minds. It's really how it works, in the sense that people with narcissistic personality disorder, it's not really a disorder. It's like they develop that way because they don't feel safe as children. And that starts with them seeing that there are other people being abused, for example, and allowing that to happen. And the fact that it is not happening to them specifically makes them feel grandiose. And that grandiosity becomes then the fertile ground for them to develop covert strategies of abuse against others. And who will ever abuse other people? Obviously, only evil people do that. Only the devil abuses us. Like, we're meant to love each other. We're meant to be children of God, and to really help one another, and to support one another, and to help one another, and to support one another, to love each other. Love is what holds us together. As much as gravity holds together planets, love is what holds humanity together at this scale of the universe. At this scale, love is a gravitational force that holds us together. So whomever does not have love for others is basically not belonging to this universe, not belonging to us. It's really something from another place, another world. Spiritually speaking, is not from here. We go back to the parable of the tares that I talked about, where the kingdom of God is this garden, this farm, where the farmer seeded a lot of wheat, and then bad weeds appeared, and the landlord is like, well, I haven't planted these things, I haven't seeded these things, the enemy has done that, but let's grow them together, and so at the end we're gonna see which one is which. And this is exactly what is happening right now. And people with narcissistic personality are ultimately people who allow evil in. And most of the times they don't even realize it, because it's a matter of fear. When you have fear and then someone comes to you and whispers to you things that make you feel comfortable and more safe than you feel all the time, such as that you're special, that you're grandiose, that you're not being abused because you're better, that you have to allow others to be abused because so you're free, you're allowed to exist and to survive because others are going through abuse on your behalf, like for you. So when you listen to that voice, you ultimately start developing a personality that is evil, because you start creating this cycle in which your survival is attached to someone else being abused. Like, you're safe because you're allowing others to go through the grinding machine that society is. And so that's the level in which people really become covert narcissists. And that's really an evil way of existing, because you're basically, it's like you have to coexist every day with the idea, I am safe because others are being abused. And this is exactly what is happening today in the world. And the reason why there are so many victims of this is because there are a lot of people instead who are simply naive about these things, and who don't have this space for evil thoughts because they don't feel grandiose. And if you don't feel grandiose, your mind is aligned, and there is really no spiritual, energetic space for anything to enter. When you're aligned, when you're self-aware and you're not grandiose, nothing enters. As soon as you feel grandiose, that energy does not belong to you anymore. It's like you're overstepping a zone that is not yours anymore. And as soon as you overstep and you create this space that is fictitious, something can enter, like energies can enter. And as a medium, I can tell you, this is really a spiritual thing. Like, literally, spiritually speaking, as soon as you feel this grandiosity and you get distracted a second, something can enter, because you have created this spiritual, energetic level for something to have room in you. And so you said, if you're not grandiose, if you don't allow ego feeding strategies to make you feel better or greater, or like bigger than what you are, then you simply don't have room for anything else other than for yourself. And so it's like you don't have a layer. It's almost like the ego, like evil, is almost like a parasite that goes through the skin, that goes under our skin. And so if you create this vision of yourself that is like bigger, and so it creates this second skin, this second layer, then what happens is that things can enter. And so things can get under your skin, and you're not going to realize it because your skin is bigger than what it should. And so going through trauma for people, even who are born healed, who are born free from generational trauma, free from sin, free from ego, even then, living in a world that is not healed, it's really impossible, because what happens is that we have to go through it to build immunity against it, to realize, okay, let me see who is what, who is which. It's like we literally become like immune cells that have to go through the body to understand, okay, this is me, this is not me, let me figure that out. So that's why the cycle breakers ultimately are becoming and have become the immune cells of the body, because we are at the forefront between the generation who had to heal and the generation who was healed, and we are just at the forefront. And so we don't realize, we don't know the difference between the two when we are born, because we are born healed already. And then we need to go through it for us to discover, okay, this is how the eyes of people who are evil look like. This is how the eyes of someone who is grandiose look like. This is how a person who feels grandiose behaves. This is how a person who is a covert narcissist behaves. And we don't know those things. And so we go in the world and we just think, okay, people are just different from one another. We don't realize that there are certain characteristics that really are the sign of dysfunctions or evil, or having trauma or having ego. We don't realize those things until we go through those things. This is obvious, right? Like, we need to learn. It's like, as much as a lion in a savannah has to learn how to recognize all the different kinds of things, and the fact that gazelles are supposed to be eaten and water is supposed to be drunk, and you're not supposed to go in places that are too dry or you're gonna die. Now, all these things, it's not that the lion knows that stuff as soon as he's born, right? It's like he learns those things while living, and hopefully having mentorship from his father, his mother, right? But it doesn't know initially. And so, same thing for us. But for people who are cycle breakers in humanity, it's like we're a new species, basically. We're like literally the flowers that are blooming from this trauma, from this concrete that is cracked with trauma. And we are these flowers that are finally being able to bloom. And for us to bloom, we don't really have mentorship around because our parents are part of the generation who had trauma. Our parents are part of the generation who had the dysfunctions. And so we cannot easily find mentorship for us to know, okay, this is how the world works. So the actual generation who is completely healed will be the generation where that will be born in a context where there will be no dysfunction and in a world where there will be no dysfunction as well. Because until you go in the world and you live your life and you do your things and you have a job, but until you do all those things in a world where most people around you are dysfunctional, you're gonna have to deal with them. And so, how do you communicate with someone who is dysfunctional if you are not dysfunctional? How do you communicate with someone who is in their ego if you're not in your ego? It's really impossible. Like, and I'm telling you, like, from a life experience, it's really impossible to communicate with people on their same level without being on their same level. At the same time, you can definitely not be on their same level. Like, what you want to aim for is overcoming that and talking to them like you would talk to a kid. But that's already you losing empathy for them, in a sense. That's already you understanding that you can be compassionate, but you cannot fully be on their same level. And so it's important to and so the only way of really keep being an empath while also doing your thing and living your life in a world that is dysfunctional becomes choosing the people you have around so that you don't have to deal with people who are egoic, that otherwise for you to be on their level. And when you're an empath, that simply means that you literally channel others and you absorb others. That's why so many empaths are healers, because empaths are people who can channel and, like, they're porous to other people's feelings, and by being porous to them they absorb them and they're capable of understanding them, of being compassionate, of being on their same level, on the real same level, the wounded level in which other people are. And so empaths ultimately empathize with the narcissistic side that is wounded, not with the narcissistic side that is the coping mechanism to the wound. But this is dangerous. It's dangerous because then you're gonna empathize with something that is really not visible to that person. That person does not know, is not aware that you are empathizing with a side of them that truly exists. They think they are projecting. You're not projecting. You're seeing something that they don't even see. They don't even know they have. And so it's important to know all of these things, but the only way to know all of these things is going through the world and, bumping on top of the walls of this room to figure out what shape it has. And this is just the only way of learning how the world works. There is no other way at this point. But unfortunately, the only way of communicating with people and to truly be and to truly understand them and to make them understand you is to talk their language. This is obvious, right? Like, language is not just about the language we speak. Language is a lot of things. It's the words we use, the kind of wavelength we're on, the lens we have on the world. So unless you use their same lens, their same wavelength, their same things, you're not going to understand them. They're not going to understand you. Like, you can have a superficial conversation with people, but you're not actually going to understand one another. So the only way to actually talk to people who are in their ego, in their trauma, is to be on that wavelength, which is very low. But empaths tend to naturally connect to that, naturally synchronize on that wavelength. And that's the main problem. And so through time in my lifetime, I had to, like, start detaching from people who were dysfunctional, because the only way for me to keep moving up and to keep evolving has been to detach from those things, to detach from those things, to detach from those people. And sometimes it's not something that we choose, in the sense that sometimes it's something that happens that we tend to hold on to, or we have to hold on to. Like, a lot of times in my life, I was in situations in which I could not simply detach from someone because that person has some sort of authority over me, my boss or my colleagues or people I will do business with. So you cannot immediately just cut bonds with people all the time. Sometimes you have to kind of stay in their relationship, even if it's not really good for you. But at the same time, that's really the only way of doing that, is to like detach, to cut bonds, or to at least compartmentalize and not allowing that to get to you. And the only way of doing that is really going no contact with people, because otherwise they weigh you down. There is really no way. But at the same time, this is just the first phase, in the sense that you can't live as an island. We are not islands, right? So we can't live as islands, and because of that, the only real long-term solution to this is to heal the world, and that's where it goes into the direction, towards the direction that I was talking about earlier. So the only way of truly being able to be ourselves, to just exist as healed people, is to heal the world around us. And once I heard this phrase from someone that was like, sometimes you can't always say things yourself. You can't always be the one doing the things you need to do for you to reach a certain goal. Sometimes someone else has to do the same thing because that person is more effective in reaching that goal. And you have to allow that. You have to learn to delegate goals and to delegate tasks to other people who are better than you at doing that. And so healing the world is not something that we do in one person. Like I by myself cannot heal the world. I can definitely try and do the things that I need. But for example, what I'm doing with this podcast is I'm helping you to heal and you to awaken so that you become an agent of change in your own life. So I can't come to your life and tell you, I can't come into your life and heal you and heal your life and heal your parents and heal your relationships and heal the world through you. But what I can do is I can give you the knowledge for you to heal. And once you do have that knowledge, then you can apply it in your lifetime. So how beautiful is that, right? But you see what I mean? It's like I'm delegating to you a portion of healing the world that I cannot control, that is out of my reach, out of my control. And especially each one of us has different potentials, because for example, I'm a scientist. I can heal the scientific field. I can heal scientists. I can heal people who are at the that are the connection. I can be the connection between the healing world and the scientific world and the population. That's exactly what I'm doing, because this is my skill set, and my background and who I am allows me to have that role. And so I can heal things like this. But every one of us has access to different things, has different skill sets, has different stuff. So as long as we use what we have and what we can to heal, to heal things, to heal the world. And sometimes healing has to do with taking one person aside and say, hey, you're evil. You should not do what you're doing. And that you should not do what you're doing. And everything is, as long as you have the purpose of healing the world, even putting someone in prison can be healing for the world. So it depends, like sometimes there are different gestures, but the intention is what matters. Like if you truly want to heal the world from evil, from darkness, and you want to spread light, then there are so many ways of doing that, and everyone has their own skill set that can be applied to this. And I'll give you some examples from my life, like of, I feel like in all the episodes of this podcast, I've been talking about all the different journeys, like all the different steps of this healing journey, which are, awakening from the naivete, awakening from the gaslighting that follows the naivete. Because if you're naive, then you become easy prey for people who want to gaslight you and abuse you. So I had to heal for that as well. And then there is the spiritual level of awakening, the spiritual healing and awakening from to the world, to the society we live in. And the more you go up, the more you realize really how religion, like how faith and God and all of these things that we are told about when we are children, but for us are just words. The more you go up in society, and as a scientist, I had to completely detach from religion for a long time in my life. But the more I move forward in the hierarchy, in exploring the higher levels of this hierarchy in the world, in society, the more I see how this is instead very relevant. And we live in a world in which God is acting through us, and some of us are sent here as reapers, like myself, to cut out the bad weeds and to make sure that I put them in a bundle and I send them to the jurisdictional system, because I'm a whistleblower and a political activist as well in a case of science fraud. And some other people are just the bad weeds that they try to make sure that they create fertile ground for the bad weeds to grow more than the weeds that the landlord has planted and is seeded in the field. So you can see that, like, initially, as I feel like as a child and as an adult, this was just like words for me. But and then I reached this level in which it was not even words. It was nothing. It was just lies. And instead, by moving past that, I realized how that level of society in which we're told these are just lies is the gaslighting we receive from our system to forget what we're here to do. Because if you forget of being part of the kingdom of God, then you're easily gonna fall into hell, into the kingdom of the devil, because it's like you don't have any faith, any aspiration to be a good person, to have a moral, to have ethics. And so it's easy for you, if you don't have rules, if you don't have boundaries, if you don't have a specific code of conduct, if you don't have a specific code of conduct for yourself, for whatever reason, for religion or for your own sake, it's easy for you to say yes to things that are ultimately a form of corruption and a form of um, not allowing us to do good things in the world, and instead deceiving us and kind of drifting our resources and our minds and our bodies and our spirit towards going to contribute to things that are not good for the world. But if you don't have a code of conduct for yourself, if you don't follow the Ten Commandments or even just the six commandments, like beyond the ones that talk about God, if you don't have those things, then it's easy for you to just say yes to anybody who tells you, hey, do this thing, because, and you don't even question yourself, is this in alignment with my code of conduct, because you don't have one. And so this is what happens in science. Science is a place where people tend to be really just gaslit to believe that there is nothing, that there's no God. The God is science. Science has become God today. But that is dangerous, because science is real, but science without a code of conduct, without following ethics, it's dangerous. And it's exactly what has become today. Like, I've seen it in my career. I've seen it by working in science, that scientists tend to be just people who are intentionally selected to not have faith, to not be Christian, and for them to be be and for them to be fearful in some way. People who don't have the courage or the intelligence, even if they're scientists, or the intuition, which is more important than intelligence, because the intuition is what allows you to connect the dots and to figure out what is actually going on. You can be very intelligent in a nerdy kind of way and going very deep into details. Like a molecular biologist will just really go very, very deep into this enzyme, this molecule, this bond between these two atoms. But ultimately, this person will completely forget the purpose of what he's doing. And so, what is he doing? Is he spending the money of the government, of the people, of the population in the right way? Is he using mice in a proper ways and animals that are already, killed and sacrificed for no reason in science? But are they even they're even being misused and used abusively? And so it's not just about being a scientist. To being intelligent is not enough. You need to be intuitive. And in order for you to be a real good scientist, you have to be a Christian in some way. You have to be someone who follows at least 6 of the commandments, the ones that don't talk about God, like don't steal, don't bear false witness, all of these things. Because otherwise, if you don't have any ethics and any code of conduct, what happens is that you're ultimately going to say yes to a lot of things that are against the population, against the general public, or you're gonna commit, be corrupted or commit fraud and science fraud, or when your boss asks you, as it happens all the time, just give me this data and I'm gonna decide what to do with them, then you say yes, and you shouldn't, because people with a PhD, having a PhD today is a very powerful position. It has become a political position. And so having a PhD is powerful. And now what scientists are doing today is giving away their PhD to be used as first author in articles that are ultimately, they contain poison for society. They contain information and discoveries that are either false or deceiving or meant to support big pharma, which is evil. And so all these people, because they don't have a code of conduct, even if they're healed, you see how important it is. It's not just about being healed, it's about knowing how the world works. Because if the world is not healed, if you end up in a cave of lions, if you end up in a place that is evil and you don't know how to recognize it, if you don't know that that place is evil, you're easily going to become a tool of that place, and you're not even going to know, even if you're healed. And so you're basically helping the world to be evil, to be sick. You're basically contributing to making the world sick. And if the world is sick, you're sick. Because now we go to the other side of this coin, of this story. What is the other side? We are the environment. Like I say it all the time in this podcast, we are the environment. We are a continuum with the environment. If you ask a fish, what color is the water, or what taste does the water have, the fish is going to ask you, what is the water? Because a fish does not know that he is immersed in water. A fish just floats. Fish probably think they're flying. You know what I mean? And in the same way, we don't see the air that is around us. But for a for a but for a bird, the air is important, because the air becomes a tool to be used. And so a bird sees and perceives the air in a completely different way as compared to us. So we don't see not only the air between us that connects us, that we breathe in and we breathe out, and we all of this that really connects us, and we are what we eat, and so we are our environment ultimately. But we especially don't see the connections, the connections made of bonds between people, made of words, made of knowledge, made of circles they're part of. We don't see any of that. But that's our environment. That's the environment we belong to. And so if we don't heal that, even if we don't see that, as much as we are naive about narcissism and ego and trauma when we are children, we are naive about fraternities and corporations and all these things that happen behind closed doors that some people are called deep state, some people call the system. Is the same thing. If we don't see all of these things, we are still naive. Um, we still become victims of this system, because that's ultimately the medium in which we live, the jungle in which we live. And so if we don't know that we live in a jungle, we're just gonna be eaten alive. And so that's exactly what happens. But at the same time, the only way to heal us is to heal the world outside of us, because we are a reflection of it. So it's not just enough being like, okay, now I know how the jungle works, let me find shelter and let me build these fences around me and do the things, which is what we're doing right now. Most people, thanks to psychologists and psychotherapists, which are ultimately narcissistic, most empaths are not being empaths anymore. They're behaving as narcissists. And so they're ultimately putting boundaries around themselves and not empathizing with people and not being compassionate. And instead of doing that, what we need to do is really to heal the world. And if we can't heal someone because they can't, like, you don't want to be a Red Cross, you don't want to have a Red Cross syndrome or a nurse's syndrome. You don't want to be the nurse having to heal everybody. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I'm saying that we can't live in a pond that is poisoned and expect for us to be healthy, because we breathe in our world. We survive in a world that is made of these things, and we need to survive in it. And so if we're surrounded by people who conspire constantly, they're going to conspire against us as well, and they're going to poison us in our life and the fence we've built around us all the time. If we deal with people who are narcissistic, they're going to abuse us. Even if they're not going to abuse us in front of us, they're going to do that behind our back. So there is no way to be a bubble in this world. There is no way to be an island. You can't just go around like islands, like psychologists tell us to do. We can't do that. What we need to do is we need to really heal the world, and we need to start from a small pond. In the sense, what you need to do is to really build a small microenvironment in which, putting boundaries is the first phase. Is not the ultimate goal. So the first phase is to build this bubble in which your world is healthy. You are keeping your world under control. Your room is tidy and clean, and your mind is tidy and clean, and your body is tidy and clean, and you've cleansed, and you're cleansed. And that's you, and you can shine that light outside. And then once you've done that, then you must keep expanding that bubble. You can't just keep it, because after a while, otherwise, the pressure from the outside is just going to break the bubble. It's just a matter of time, because you live in a world in which, after a while, the bubble will become permeable to all of this pressure and break. And so the only way to continue this job is really to keep expanding the bubble. But as everything in nature bubbles, and everything that has to do with this universe, we cannot scale up by ourselves. We have to scale up with people, because like, there's really a limit. There are physical limitations to how big this bubble can be, and ultimately the bubble can grow if there are more people in it. It's like, imagine this bubble like a layer around you, like your aura. And so your aura surrounds your body, but you can't grow an aura that is bigger than you, because that's grandiosity, remember? And so you can't grow more than a certain amount without actually growing as a community. And so healing the world is not just about expanding your bubble by yourselves. That's almost impossible. Other than the social media. With social media, it's different, because you're basically shining your light, and you're not increasing your aura. But by shining your light on others, by talking to others through social media, and by being yourself, and by healing, by shining this light of healing, you're ultimately shining on other people. You're healing them, and you're creating this domino effect. And by doing that, you're basically including all of these people in your aura. And so your aura is scaling up, your aura is growing. And so you're doing that because you're ultimately including more people, which is exactly what I'm talking about. So the only real way of healing the world is to scale up after healing. And so all the things that I told you so far, in this podcast, and we have finally, we went from holistic healing and different kinds of modalities of healing, and all the different kinds of ways of healing that we need to go through, all the different steps of the healing process and of the awakening process that we need to go through. But after that, then there is spirituality in God, and that's inevitable. You're going to reach that point as well. The more you grow up, the more you raise, the more you progress in this journey, the more you're going to find out that there is a part that is called spirituality, or religion, or Christianity, or God, or Jesus, or how you want to call it, that is just the next level, and you're going to find it as well. Once you find that, you're going to realize that you're going to see the world, and you're going to realize, oh wow, the world is sick. Like, there are a lot of people who are lost sheep. There are a lot of people who are going through abuse. There are a lot of people who are abusing others, and who are poisoning the world in which I'm living. Now I see all of those things. What am I going to do? What side am I going to pick? And obviously you can't pick the evil side unless you want to be evil. And so you must empathize with those people. And if you empathize with them, then you have to realize that the world needs healing, that you have to participate in that. And so I have created a group, if you guys want to join, on WhatsApp in my community. We are one that you can reach. Send me an email and I'm going to add you to that community. And the group is called Heal the World, because by going through my things and by trying to find support in my community when I went through a lot of different issues in my life, and I tried to expand my bubble in the sense of being part of a community that was already healed, the healing community, for example. And instead I found that it's really just another cave of lions. It's just another place where people who are evil or people with trauma hide, and hide in plain sight. It's like the devil puts the mask of, oh wow, it's like narcissistic abuse is the same thing. Like narcissists just simply put on the mask of the good person, and they go to church and they go and hang out in healing communities and in men's circles and in women's circles and in all of those things. And ultimately what they're doing is just simply putting on a mask that prevent people from seeing who they truly are, and they create a whole community in which they can hang out with their friends and pretend of calling themselves healers, and that's what it is. But that's really not what it's supposed to be. Like, if you don't support people who are in trouble, if you don't empathize with people who are in trouble, then you're not a healer. That's what healing is ultimately. And so healing the world is really necessary for us. It's not just about, this ultimately comes from fear. Like when people are fearful, then they are like, you know what, I'm going to create my own small pocket and I'm going to be living there and hanging out there and doing my things there. But as I said, this is not the solution, because then the only way for you to truly feel like you're happy, you're joyful, is to pretend that there's no one else who is suffering outside, that there's nothing else to deal with, that you're fine, the world is perfect. But that's not true. You're gaslighting yourself. You're living in a bubble, right? And you're exactly living in a bubble. And so people who are fearful, unfortunately, do these sort of things. And people who are fearful are people who become narcissistic, because that's exactly the point. If you're fearful, then you feel like the world is hostile and you close down, how you say, and you decide, okay, I want to pretend everything is fine and I don't want to deal with anything else. So either you should be someone who does it is already either selfish or evil or very, very fearful. But at the same time, living in a world like this, where people, instead of healing, they simply put boundaries and they simply decide to cut off everybody who is not like them and to create communities of people like them, that's not real healing. That's not real healing. That's closing ourselves in a bubble. And so how do we heal the world? So let's talk about this. So what does that mean, to heal the world? And can we do that on our own? Like, how does that work? There are a lot of ways of healing the world. And one of those is, for example, healing yourself and then shining your light on the world. But again, this is not enough, in the sense that after a while, this bubble is gonna just, either you go into a cave or you really isolate. And you can do that. Like, you can isolate and then show yourself only through social media, for example, so that you can shine your light on the world, and without having to go through all the actual darkness of the world. You can do that, but it's still not enough. And so there is another level of healing, which is truly acting, because shining the light of healing onto others allows them to heal themselves. But the world in which we live, society in which we live, is made of laws, is made of things that are allowed or not allowed, is made of authorities, is made of people who are, authorities in their field, politicians, congress people, senators, offices and governments and corporations and all these things. And there are rules and regulations, things that are allowed and not allowed. And based on that defines how healthy our world is. Because in a world in which you are mandated to do things that are against your health, then that's not a healthy world. And you see this bubble, how this bubble cannot resist. Like, you can resist to your surroundings, but there are certain things you cannot resist to, such as if a government mandates you to do something, right? And so you cannot resist that. And not just that, we've seen it throughout the pandemic, in which it's not just about the government mandating us to do things, but if people are not healed, if people are traumatized, if people are not awakened, they are going to become the force, the pressure that pushes us, and it's called peer pressure, that pushes us to cave in and to be forced to do things that are against our health. So you see how this is really necessary. Like, you can't really stand your ground unless you also change things around you. Like, every time you try to build a bubble, that's really not sustainable, and it becomes just thinner and thinner and thinner until it breaks. So part of healing the world is truly political activism. And so I am a political activist because I am a cycle breaker. And I realized throughout my life that it's not enough to heal. It's not enough to start becoming a coach against narcissism, and to coach people to recover from narcissistic abuse. It's not enough to train people on how to deal with their toxic work environment. It's not enough to just give exposure to the truth through this podcast. It's not enough to just select healers and give them a stage where they can show their skills and their gifts against Western healthcare. It's not enough to do all of these things. We also need to change the law. And that's what I'm doing as well. And so that's why the church that I founded, which is the Church of Truth, works in these three different ways. From one side, I expose the truth and I tell the truth. From another side, I heal people and I give people exposure to healers and to healing modalities that are foreign to the Western healthcare. From another side, um, I give exposure to real science, to truthful science, to real effects of things, to truthfulness in a scientific sense. From another side, I give people exposure to how the world works in terms of politics and laws and things like that. But from another side, I'm also a pro se litigant in big cases of fraud, and I have litigated by myself for a long time now. And so we need to change the law, otherwise we're always in the same place. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm fighting fights. They're not just about healing people, but healing my environment, so that I'm going to the root cause of the problem, because the root cause of the problem is at the head. We always say in Italian that the fish smells from the head. And this means that, the brain, the mind that coordinates everything is the real problem. There is this misconception. And I had this chat once with a professor, an Israeli professor, Sam Vaknin, and I've interviewed him because he's a world expert on narcissistic abuse, but he's a narcissist himself, and he knows that, and he says that, and he's basically studying himself. But there's always a point up to which he can't go past it, in the sense that he's still a narcissist, and so you can't see your own ego, you can't see your own limitations if you're in it, right? And so there's always a point, there are always limitations that he reaches. And so I have, in this interview, we're talking about the fact, he was saying, all the things, all the psychopathies and the things we had in histories came from the population. Like, Hitler has been voted and elected by people who were psychopathic, but that's not true. It was just a pawn. Hitler was a pawn in Nazism. Nazism has been created, like the Holocaust has been a fictitious creation that allowed to perform experiments on the population. And so we believe that this crazy guy, this psychopathic guy, simply decided to go to the government and people voted for him. This is what we're told. The people voted for this guy and he sent to death a lot of Jews. This is not what actually happened. Like, if you actually study the Holocaust, what actually happened is that there has been a lot of experimentation, like literally, like the real point, the real point of their Nazi regime was to make experiments, to perform experiments on the vulnerable categories of the population, so the non-Aryan people, to spare Aryans and to allow the Aryan Nazi scientists to go to power in science. This is all it was about. And they used the excuse, the excuse of Jews and religion and all these things. It's the same thing that is being done in Gaza right now, right? Like they're using the excuse of religion, but ultimately this war is about politics, is about evil, is about other things that we don't realize. And yes, it has to do with religion as well, but in a different way. Like people are told this story, about religion in sense of the ideology. It's not about ideology. These people are really evil. Those who are bombing Gaza constantly, they're really just evil. They're the devil. Who would do something like that? And so it's not about ideology. It's really about being an evil person. And so in the same way, things don't come from the bottom. Things come from the top. There are people in our society who are really trying to lead the population towards destruction. They're really trying to depopulate us, and they do this in all kinds of ways that we don't realize. I recently posted something that was done by a post that went viral, where ChatGPT, when asked, if you were the devil, what would you do to destroy the population? And ultimately says things are already happening, because that's exactly the point. This is exactly the point. This is not just happening. This has been caused intentionally through years and decades of work and effort and joining forces between different powers and corporations and institutions. So this is already happening. And so as you can see, healing the world, we went from healing ourselves, from the naivete of being ourselves, narcissistic abuse and evil, and however you want to call it, to then realizing that there is a whole world that comes after it, that is society. So all these different power structures and networks that really are the core of the brain of our society, but not in a good way. This is a tumor. This is not an actual brain. This is someone who is sucking out the life from the population to depopulate the planet and conquer it. It's almost as if they were aliens, truly. So I don't really know what to think about this, but it's really like these people are acting as if they are not us. But if we don't heal that, if we don't detach from that world, if we don't change things, if we don't spread awareness, if we don't bond with our brothers and sisters and siblings and with all the people who belong to this earth, to this world, to this kingdom of God, if we don't bond and we don't start shining light and pushing and pushing and pushing out to make this bubble get bigger and bigger and bigger, we're never going to win, because our bubble is just going to be broken after a while. It's just a matter of time. And so it's fundamental to keep scaling up. And so if you want to scale up, and if you want to be part of a movement that wants to heal the world in a lot of different ways, just message me at info@360holisticcoach.com and just tell me you want to be part of this movement, and I'll let you know the next steps. But I am doing it, and you should do that as well. We all should do that. So it doesn't require a lot. It's just a matter of coordinating effort all together to go towards the same direction, so that we can truly heal ourselves and the world around us. I hope this episode has been useful to you, and I might actually start a new season in which I'm going to be focusing on really interviewing also whistleblowers and people who have more things to say about these topics, and at the same time healers who will really understand and are awakened and woke, because there are so many ways of talking about the world and so many things we can say from so many angles and perspectives. And we already touched on self-healing, healing trauma, ego, and then ego, evil, spirituality, and then the next step, the next necessary and just logical next step is the rest, what is outside of ourselves, our community, our world, where we're part of. And so I hope you enjoyed it. And again, my website is 360holisticcoach.com. Please contact me, message me, and you can follow me on Instagram at 360holistic.coach. And keep following these podcasts because it's not done yet, and there's going to be a lot more to discover. And thank you so much for listening, and bye.